The pink frosting was still fresh on the knife when the screams started. 60 guests had gathered at a luxury villa in Dubai to celebrate new life balloons, laughter, a cake that would reveal whether the baby was a boy or a girl. But when that cake was cut and pink spilled across the white plate, celebration turned to horror. Within minutes, a pregnant woman lay dead, killed by the man who'd promised to love her forever. The crime? She was carrying a daughter, not the son, he demanded. But what could drive a man to destroy the very family he claimed to want so desperately? Welcome to True Crime Journal HQ. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay with me for daily update on the most shocking true crime stories. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Sana al-Rashan wasn't supposed to die at 26. She had plans, big ones. Born in 1997 to a family that valued education and independence, Sana grew up in a household where her opinions mattered. Her father owned a successful import business, and her mother worked as a school principal. They raised Sana and her younger sister to believe they could be anything they wanted. And Sana wanted to create. She spent her teenage years sketching dress designs in notebooks, filling pages with flowing abayas reimagined with modern cuts and bold colors. After graduating high school, she enrolled at the American University in Dubai to study fashion design. Her professors remembered her as passionate, meticulous, someone who stayed late in the studio perfecting every seam. She dreamed of launching her own modest fashion line, something that honored tradition while pushing boundaries. By 2019, at 22, Sana had her degree and a small following on Instagram where she showcased her designs. She was saving money, planning her first collection, talking to manufacturers. Life felt full of possibility. That's when her parents mentioned Faris al-Hamdan. It wasn't a forced arrangement, nothing like that, just a suggestion. A family friend knew the al-Hamdans, a respected family in Dubai's business community. Faris was 31, educated in London, working in his father's real estate firm. He seemed like a good match on paper, modern, ambitious, from a good family. Just meet him, her mother said. See if you connect. Their first meeting was at a cafe in Dubai Marina. Faris arrived in a crisp white kandura, smelling of expensive cologne. He was handsome, warm brown eyes, an easy smile that made Sana's heart skip. They talked for 2 hours. He asked about her fashion dreams, seemed genuinely interested. He told her about his work, about traveling to London for business school, about wanting to expand his family's company into new markets. He seemed different from other men she'd met through family connections. He didn't dismiss her ambitions or suggest she'd give up work after marriage. He laughed at her jokes. He listened. They met 5 more times over the next 2 months, always with family present, following tradition. Each time, Faris was charming, attentive, respectful. He brought her flowers. He asked thoughtful questions. When he proposed in December 2019, Sana said yes, without hesitation. The warning signs were there, barely visible, easy to miss when you're falling in love. During their engagement, Faris made comments that felt harmless at first. "I can't wait to have sons with you," he'd say, laughing. "Little boys to carry on the al-Hamdan name." When Sana mentioned wanting 2 or 3 children, he'd joke, "Better make it 4 or 5, need to make sure we get at least 3 boys." She'd laugh along, thinking he was joking. Lots of men expressed preference for sons, didn't they? It was cultural, not serious. At family gatherings with the al-Hamdans, Sana noticed the dynamic. Faris's father, a stern man in his 60s, barely acknowledged the wives and daughters at the table. His focus was always on his sons, especially Faris's 2 younger brothers who both had sons of their own. The grandfather would bounce these boys on his knee, beaming with pride, while Faris watched with an expression Sana couldn't quite read. Once, at a dinner 3 months before their wedding, Faris's father looked at Sana and said, "You're young and healthy. You'll give us strong grandsons, inshallah." Everyone nodded. Sana smiled politely, feeling suddenly small. They married in February 2020, just before the pandemic locked down the world. The wedding was lavish, 300 guests, a dress Sana had designed herself, white with gold embroidery. Faris looked at her like she was the only person in the room. In that moment, she felt loved, safe, chosen. The first year of marriage was good, mostly. They lived in a spacious apartment in Dubai Marina. Faris was attentive, generous. He encouraged her to work on her fashion business, even helped her set up meetings with potential investors. They traveled when restrictions lifted: Maldives, Paris, Istanbul. In photos from that time, Sana is smiling, genuinely happy. But there was pressure building beneath the surface. 3 months after the wedding, Faris's mother started asking when they'd have good news. 6 months in, the questions became more frequent, more pointed. Faris's father would make comments at family dinners about continuing the lineage. His brothers' wives would share knowing looks, cradling their pregnant bellies or chasing their toddler sons around the room. Sana felt it, the weight of expectation, the invisible clock ticking louder with each passing month. She and Faris were trying, but pregnancy wasn't happening immediately. By their first anniversary, the joy had started to crack. Faris became distant when they attended family events. He'd go quiet during the drive home, his jaw tight. Once, after a particularly uncomfortable dinner where his father asked pointed questions about delays, Faris snapped at her in the car. "They think something's wrong," he said. "They think you can't conceive." "It takes time," Sana replied, her voice shaking. "We've only been trying a year. My brother's wives got pregnant in months." The comparison stung. It was the first time Faris had made her feel inadequate, like her value was measured only in her ability to produce children. Specifically, male children. The arguments increased. Not loud fights, but cold silences that lasted days. Faris threw himself into work, coming home late. Sana poured herself into her fashion business, launching a small collection that sold modestly well. But the success felt hollow when her husband barely acknowledged it. By late 2022, Sana was exhausted not just from trying to conceive, but from carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. Her mother tried to comfort her. Her sister told her to be patient. But isolation crept in anyway. How could she explain that the man she'd married, the one who'd seemed so modern, so understanding, was changing into someone she barely recognized? Have you ever felt pressured to meet someone else's expectations, even when it cost you your peace? Sana was living it every day. And the worst part? She still loved him. She still believed that once she got pregnant, everything would return to how it was in the beginning. That hope, fragile and desperate, was what kept her going. She had no idea how deadly that hope would become. To understand what Faris Al-Hamdan became, you need to understand where he came from. The Al-Hamdan family had built an empire over 3 generations. Faris's grandfather started with a single construction company in the 1970 seconds, riding Dubai's transformation from fishing village to global metropolis. By the time Faris was born in 1992, the family controlled a real estate portfolio worth hundreds of millions, luxury developments, commercial towers, residential complexes across the Emirates. But wealth came with weight. Faris was the eldest son, born with expectations embedded in his DNA. His father, Ahmed Al-Hamdan, made it clear from childhood the family legacy would pass through male heirs. Sons mattered. Sons built empires. Sons carried names into the future. "A man without sons is a tree without roots," Ahmed would say, repeating a proverb that became the family motto. He has nothing to anchor him to eternity. Faris grew up watching his father dismiss his 3 daughters, Faris's sisters, as afterthoughts. They were loved, provided for, but never consulted on business matters, never groomed to lead. Their purpose was to marry well and produce grandsons for other families. The real inheritance, the real power, would go to the sons. Faris was supposed to be the crown prince of this dynasty. He did everything right, at least on the surface. He excelled in school, earned his business degree from London School of Economics, returned to Dubai ready to take his place in the family company. His father put him in charge of a new development project, a test to prove his worth. The project failed. Bad timing, poor market research, contractors who cut corners. Faris made mistakes that cost the family millions. His father was furious. For months, Ahmed barely spoke to him at the office. At family dinners, his disappointment hung in the air like smoke. Then Faris's younger brothers started having sons. Khalid, 2 years younger, welcomed his first son in 2018. The family celebrated for days. Ahmed threw a massive party, invited half of Dubai's business elite. He held his grandson like a trophy, beaming with pride. "This boy will build skyscrapers," he announced to guests. "The Al-Hamdan name is secured." Faris watched from the sidelines, still unmarried, still trying to redeem himself after his business failure. A year later, Rashid, the youngest brother, had twin boys. Another celebration, more beaming grandparents, more comments about legacy and continuity. At Sunday dinners, Ahmed would sit with his 3 grandsons, teaching them Arabic phrases, bouncing them on his knee, talking about the empire they'd inherit. Faris's sisters and their daughters were there too, but invisible in comparison. The message was clear. Male heirs were what mattered, and Faris had none. The comments started subtle. "When will you settle down?" his mother would ask. His father was more direct. "Your brothers are beating you in the race that matters most. The race that matters most. Not business success, not education, not character-producing sons." By the time Faris met Sana in 2019, he was desperate to prove himself. Marriage wasn't just about love, it was about redemption. A wife who could give him sons would restore his standing in the family. It would show his father he was still worthy of the Al-Hamdan name. But when pregnancy didn't happen immediately, the old anxieties returned. At family gatherings, Faris endured his father's pointed silences. His brothers would talk about their son's milestones, while Faris sat quiet, feeling like a failure again, the business disappointment he could almost forgive himself for. But this felt like failing at the most fundamental level. His father's words echoed constantly. "A man proves his strength through his sons." The pressure twisted something inside Faris. What started as cultural preference became obsession. He started tracking Sana's cycle religiously, demanding she take fertility tests, even though doctors said everything was normal. He researched gender selection methods, asked invasive questions about diet and timing. When Sana finally got pregnant in January 2023, Faris didn't just hope for a boy. He convinced himself it had to be a boy. He couldn't face another disappointment. Not in front of his family. At work, his father still treated him like the son who'd failed. At home, his wife wasn't pregnant yet, with the grandson that would change everything. Faris felt trapped, suffocating under expectations he couldn't meet. So when Sana finally conceived, Faris built his entire identity around the assumption that this baby would be male. He told his father first, before even celebrating with Sana. Ahmed's response? "Good, it's about time. Make sure it's a boy." Make sure it's a boy, as if Faris had control over biology, as if his worth as a man depended on chromosomes. He painted the nursery blue before any ultrasound, bought tiny kanduras, registered his son at an elite school. He talked constantly about "when my son arrives," as if saying it enough times would make it true. Colleagues noticed his obsession, friends found it excessive, but no one said anything men wanting sons was normal, wasn't it? What they didn't see was how Faris's mind was fracturing under pressure. 3 years of feeling inadequate, of watching his younger brothers succeed where he'd failed, of enduring his father's disappointment. It had warped his thinking. The baby became symbolic of everything. Proof of his manhood, redemption for his business failures, restoration of his status in the family. A daughter would mean none of that. A daughter would mean he'd failed again. Do traditions and family expectations ever justify the pain they cause? Where should we draw the line? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching. Faris crossed that line long before the baby shower. He crossed it the moment he measured his wife's value by her ability to produce male children. He crossed it when obsession replaced love, when pride mattered more than the life growing inside Sana. And if you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. Because what happened next would show just how dangerous that obsession had become. January 15th, 2023, the day Sana saw 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, should have been the happiest of her life. She stared at the test in their bathroom, hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. After 2 years of trying, of doctor's appointments and temperature tracking and mounting pressure, it had finally happened. She was pregnant. The relief was overwhelming, physical, like she could finally breathe after holding her breath for months. Faris was at work when she took the test. She wanted to tell him in person, see his face light up. So she waited, planning how to share the news. Maybe a special dinner, a small gift with the ultrasound photo. But when Faris came home that evening and she told him, his reaction wasn't what she expected. He didn't ask how she was feeling, didn't hug her first. He said, "It's a boy. I know it is." Not a question. A statement. A certainty that left no room for other possibilities. Sana laughed nervously. "We won't know for months." "I can feel it," Faris interrupted, pulling her into an embrace. "My son." Finally. That night, Faris called his father to share the news. Sana heard him through the bedroom door. "Yes, Baba, we're expecting. Yes, I'm sure it will be a boy. I'll make you proud this time." The weight of those words settled on Sana's shoulders like stones. Over the following weeks, Faris's assumption hardened into conviction. He started calling the baby him exclusively. At the 8-week appointment, when the doctor said it was too early to determine sex, Faris waved it off. "Just tell us at the next one. We're having a son." The doctor glanced at Sana, who forced a smile. By March, Faris had started preparing. He chose a name Hamdan, after his grandfather. He researched the best schools in Dubai, talking about enrollment as if the baby was already born. He told colleagues at work about "my son." He showed Sana photos of kanduras for toddlers, miniature versions of what Emirati men wore. Sana wanted to be excited. She tried to match his enthusiasm, but something felt wrong, suffocating. Every time Faris said, "when our son arrives," she felt a flutter of panic. What if the baby was a girl? Would he be disappointed? Would his family be disappointed? She pushed the thoughts away. Lots of fathers wanted sons. It didn't mean he'd love a daughter any less, right? April 2023, 16 weeks pregnant. The anatomy scan. Sana went to the appointment alone. Faris had an important business meeting he couldn't miss. The ultrasound technician, a kind Filipino woman named Marie, smiled as she moved the wand across Sana's belly. "Would you like to know the sex?" Marie asked. Sana's heart pounded. "Yes." Marie angled the screen. "Congratulations. You're having a healthy baby girl." The world stopped. A girl. A daughter. Beautiful. Perfect. Growing inside her. And Faris would be devastated. Sana knew it in her bones. She knew from the way he talked about sons, the way his father treated granddaughters versus grandsons, the way 3 years of pressure had warped him into someone who measured worth by gender. Are you sure?" Sana whispered. Marie showed her the images, explained the markers. 100% certain. See here, definitely a girl." Sana left the clinic with the ultrasound photos in an envelope, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the steering wheel. She sat in the hospital parking lot for 30 minutes, staring at the images of her daughter, this tiny person, already loved, already wanted by her. But how would she tell Faris? She drove home and hid the medical report in her bedside drawer, beneath old magazines and receipts. When Faris came home that evening, he asked about the appointment. "Everything's fine," Sana said. "Baby's healthy. And, boy or girl?" The lie came easily, terrifyingly easily. They couldn't tell yet. Baby wasn't in the right position. Faris frowned but accepted it. Next appointment then. That night, Sana lay awake, her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter move. She made a promise. "I'll protect you. I'll tell him. I just need to find the right moment." But the right moment never came. Week 17. Faris painted the nursery sky blue, humming as he worked. Sana watched from the doorway, the words stuck in her throat. Week 19. Faris's mother threw a small family gathering to celebrate the pregnancy. Ahmed Al-Hamdan toasted, "The next Al-Hamdan heir." Sana smiled through clenched teeth. Week 21. Faris came home with shopping bags full of tiny boy clothes, blue onesies, miniature football jerseys, a stuffed camel wearing a kandura. "For our son," he said proudly. Sana thanked him, then cried in the bathroom. Each week, the deception grew heavier. Each week, telling the truth became harder. Sana confided only in her mother and younger sister, Layla. They met for coffee at a quiet cafe where Sana finally broke down. "I don't know what to do," she sobbed. "He's built this entire fantasy around having a son. What happens when he finds out?" Her mother, ever practical, said, "You tell him the truth. He's your husband. He'll adjust." But Layla, who'd watched Faris's transformation over the years, looked worried. "Sana, have you considered? I mean, the way he's been acting lately, it's intense. Maybe tell him somewhere public, with family around?" That's when the idea formed. The baby shower. Faris had initially resisted the concept too Western, he'd said, but Sana convinced him by framing it as a gender reveal party, a celebration to announce their son to their friends and extended family. He'd agreed, excited to show off. Sana saw it differently. Surrounded by 60 witnesses, with his family and hers present, Faris wouldn't explode. He couldn't. Social pressure would keep him calm. They could talk privately afterward, work through his disappointment together. It seemed logical, safe. The medical report stayed hidden in her drawer. The nursery became a monument to a son who didn't exist. Faris continued shopping for boy clothes, talking to Sana's belly about teaching him to play football, taking him to the family business one day. By August, 7 months pregnant, Sana felt like she was drowning. The secret had become a living thing, growing alongside her daughter. She couldn't eat without guilt, couldn't sleep without anxiety. She'd gained weight rapidly, stress eating, her doctor said, and her blood pressure was elevated. Layla begged her to tell Faris before the shower. What if he finds out another way? What if someone else tells him? But Sana was committed now. 1 more week. Just 1 more week until the baby shower on August 12th. 1 more week, and the truth would finally be out. If you were Sana, carrying this secret, what would you have done? Was there a right choice? The pink cake was ordered, the decorations purchased, the guest list finalized. 60 people would witness the reveal. 60 people to keep things calm and civil. Sana told herself this was the right decision, the safe decision. But Sana had no idea that her plan for a safe reveal would become the most dangerous decision of her life. Saturday, August 12th, 2023. The morning arrived with clear blue skies and temperatures already climbing toward 40 degrees Celsius. Sana woke at 6 a.m., her heart racing before she even opened her eyes. Today, it would all be over today. She placed her hand on her swollen belly, feeling her daughter kick, and whispered, "We can do this." In the shower, she rehearsed what she'd say after the reveal. "I know you wanted a son, but our daughter will be just as amazing. We'll love her just as much." The words sounded hollow even to her own ears. By 2 p.m., the villa they'd rented in Arabian ranches was transformed. Not blue. Sana had insisted on that. Instead, soft pastels, pale pink and powder blue balloons arranged in elegant clusters, white roses in crystal vases, gold accents catching the afternoon light. The decorations were deliberately neutral, though Sana had ensured the caterer understood. Pink cake filling, no mistakes. The cake itself sat on the main table, a 3-tiered masterpiece covered in white fondant with delicate gold leaf. From the outside, it revealed nothing. Inside, layers of strawberry cream waited to tell the truth Sana had hidden for 4 months. Guests began arriving at 3 p.m. 60 people, family, friends, Faris's business colleagues, members of both their extended families. Women in designer abayas embraced Sana, touching her belly for luck. Men clapped Faris on the shoulder, making jokes about sleepless nights ahead. Faris was glowing. He wore a pristine white kandura, his gutra perfectly arranged, moving through the crowd like a politician at a campaign event. Sana watched him accept congratulations, heard him laugh with his brothers, saw him stand beside his father, who'd actually smiled at him, a rare occurrence. "He's going to make a great father," one guest said to Sana. She smiled, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Layla, her sister, pulled her aside near the dessert table. "You're pale. Do you need to sit down?" "I'm fine," Sana lied, smoothing down her pink dress, a flowing, floor-length gown that accommodated her 7-month belly. She'd chosen pink deliberately, a subtle hint of what was coming. "It's not too late," Layla whispered. "We could take him aside right now, tell him privately." "No." Sana's voice was firm. "This is better. With everyone here, he'll have to stay calm." Layla didn't look convinced, but she squeezed Sana's hand anyway. At 4 p.m., Faris's mother called everyone to gather around the main table. The cake sat at the center, surrounded by gifts wrapped in blue paper most guests had assumed, bought accordingly. Sana felt a wave of nausea seeing those blue packages. Faris moved to stand beside her, his arm around her waist, his smile confident. He leaned down and whispered, "Ready to introduce our son to everyone?" Sana's mouth went dry. She managed a nod. The crowd pressed closer, phones out, recording, capturing what they thought would be a joyful moment. Sana's mother stood off to the side, her face tight with worry. Ahmed Al-Hamdan stood with his arms crossed, waiting to finally see his eldest son succeed at something. Faris's mother handed them the knife together. "On 3, she announced. 1, 2, 3. They cut into the cake. The knife slid through white fondant, through layers of sponge, and when they lifted the slice onto a white porcelain plate, pink cream spilled out like a confession. For 3 seconds, there was silence. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Then someone Faris's aunt squealed with delight. A girl! It's a girl! Mabruk! Applause erupted. Women ululated, the traditional celebratory sound echoing through the villa. Guests surged forward to congratulate them, to embrace Sana, to celebrate the news. But Sana wasn't looking at them. She was looking at Faris. His smile had frozen, then cracked, then vanished entirely. His face went from joy to confusion to something else, something cold and dark that made Sana's blood turn to ice. The transformation took maybe 5 seconds, but she saw every stage of it. His hand, which had been resting gently on her waist, suddenly gripped her wrist, hard. His fingers dug into her skin like a vice. "You knew." His voice was low, meant only for her, cutting through the celebration around them. "You've known all along." "Faris, I can explain," Sana started, trying to pull her wrist free. "All this time." His grip tightened. She could feel her pulse throbbing under his fingers. "You've been lying to me, making a fool of me." Guests were still celebrating, not yet noticing the storm building at the center of the party. Layla saw it first, her sister's face going white with pain. Faris's expression twisted into something unrecognizable. "Faris, please, you're hurting me." "How long?" He was shaking now, his whole body vibrating with rage. "How long have you known?" "Since April. But I was going to tell you. The table exploded. Faris released her wrist only to sweep his arm across the table in one violent motion. The cake, plates, glasses, gift boxes, everything crashed to the floor in a cascade of destruction. Pink frosting smeared across white tablecloth, across the marble floor. Crystal glasses shattered. The 3-tiered cake collapsed into ruin. The celebration stopped instantly. Silence fell like a hammer. 4 months, Faris roared, his voice echoing through the villa. 4 months you've been lying to me. Guests backed away, forming a circle around them. Some women grabbed their children, pulling them behind their legs. Men stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. Sana's hand went instinctively to her belly, protective. "I was scared." "Scared?" Faris laughed, but it was a horrible sound, nothing like joy. "You humiliated me, in front of everyone. My father, my family, everyone I know. You let me believe I was having a son." "It's still our baby," Sana pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "She's still ours. A daughter is not what I needed." The words hung in the air, brutal and final. Ahmed Al-Hamdan stepped forward. "Faris, not here. Take her inside. Handle this privately." But Faris wasn't listening. He grabbed Sana's arm and started dragging her toward the villa's interior. She stumbled in her dress, 7 months pregnant and unbalanced. "Faris, stop!" Layla screamed, running forward. Other guests shouted. 2 of Faris's cousins moved to intervene, but he shoved past them with strength born from rage. "What would you do if you witnessed this scene unfolding in front of you?" The last thing the guests saw before Faris pulled Sana into the villa was her face terrified, tears mixing with mascara, one hand on her belly protecting the daughter who'd just been revealed to the world. The door slammed shut. For a moment, stunned silence. Then shouting from inside. Sana's voice, high and frightened, pleading. Faris's voice, loud with fury, the sound of something heavy being thrown. But the broken cake and shattered table were nothing compared to what came next. Inside the villa, away from the 60 witnesses, Faris's rage found no boundaries. The guests stood paralyzed in the garden for maybe 10 seconds before the male relatives snapped into action. Khalid and Rashid, Faris's brothers, ran toward the villa door. Ahmed Al-Hamdan shouted for them to stop his son. 3 of Faris's cousins followed. They found the door locked from inside. "Faris, open this door." Khalid pounded on the heavy wood. "Faris, let her go." From inside came the sound of Sana's voice, high and desperate. "Please, think about the baby. Faris, please." Then furniture being overturned, glass breaking, a heavy thud that made everyone outside flinch. Khalid threw his shoulder against the door. It didn't budge. Rashid joined him. The door was solid, mahogany, built to last. In the garden, chaos erupted. Women screamed, gathering their children. Sana's mother collapsed, held up by 2 friends. Layla was hysterical, trying to push past the men to get inside, clawing at them when they held her back. "Someone call the police," a guest shouted. Multiple phones came out. Fingers shaking, people dialed 999. "There's a domestic violence situation, a pregnant woman, please hurry." Arabian Ranches, Villa 47. Inside, Sana was begging. Her voice carried through the windows, which were closed, but not soundproof. "I'm sorry. I was scared to tell you. But she's still your daughter. She's still your child. You made me look like a fool." Faris's voice was unrecognizable, guttural. "Everyone knew before me. You planned this." "No, I swear. I just wanted everyone there so you wouldn't." The sound of a slap, sharp, unmistakable. Sana cried out. Outside, Khalid and Rashid were ramming the door together now, a battering ram of human desperation. Ahmed stood frozen, his face ashen. This was his son, his eldest boy, the one he'd raised to value male heirs above all else. What had he created? More sounds from inside. Struggle. Sana screaming. "Stop! The baby! You're hurting the baby!" Furniture crashing. Something glass shattering, maybe a mirror, maybe a window. The villa was large, and they couldn't see into the room where Faris had taken her. "Please." Sana's voice again, weaker now. "I can't breathe, Faris. I can't." Then a sound that would haunt the survivors forever. A wet, choked gasp. Cut short, followed by a thud. Then silence. Complete, terrible silence. "No!" Layla screamed. "Sana!" Khalid and Rashid threw themselves at the door with renewed desperation. On the fourth hit, the lock gave way. The door burst open. They ran through the villa's entrance hall, following the trail of destruction, overturned vase, broken picture frames to the main living room. What they found would be described in police reports, in witness testimonies, in nightmares for years to come. Sana lay on the marble floor, her pink dress spread around her like spilled paint. Her face was purple, eyes open but unseeing, dark bruises already forming around her neck. One arm stretched out toward the door, as if she'd been trying to crawl away. The other arm was curled around her belly, even in death trying to protect her daughter. Faris stood over her, his white kandura spotted with blood from where Sana's head had struck the coffee table. His hands were still clenched into fists. His chest heaved with exertion. His face was blank, empty, like he'd left his own body. For 3 seconds, the brothers just stared. Then Khalid lunged, tackling Faris to the ground. Rashid dropped to his knees beside Sana, pressing his fingers to her neck, searching desperately for a pulse he wouldn't find. "Call an ambulance!" Rashid screamed toward the door where other guests were now crowding. "She's not breathing." Ahmed Al-Hamdan appeared in the doorway and stopped. His face went grey. He staggered backward, held up by his wife who'd followed him inside. She saw her daughter-in-law's body and released a sound no human should have to make a wail of pure anguish. The ambulance was called at 4:39 p.m. Arabian Ranches was 20 minutes from the nearest hospital, but emergency services were dispatched immediately. The operator stayed on the line, giving instructions for CPR. Rashid, hands shaking, tilted Sana's head back and started compressions. 30 pumps, 2 breaths. 30 pumps, 2 breaths. Her chest rose and fell with his efforts, but it was mechanical, not life. Other guests flooded into the villa now. The women held back Layla and Sana's mother, not letting them see. The men formed a circle around the scene, blocking the view from children outside. Khalid had Faris pinned to the ground, knee in his back. Faris wasn't fighting. He lay still, face pressed against marble, saying nothing. The ambulance arrived at 4:47 p.m., 8 minutes that felt like hours. Paramedics burst through the door with equipment, taking over from Rashid's exhausted arms. They worked fast. Oxygen mask, chest compressions with professional precision, checking vital signs, preparing the defibrillator. One paramedic focused on Sana, while another prepared emergency measures for the baby. 7 months was viable, if they could deliver fast enough. But there was too much damage. Blunt force trauma to the head, where she'd been slammed into the coffee table. Petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes indicating strangulation. The baby's heart rate, monitored through the portable ultrasound they carried, was absent. At 4:47 p.m., the senior paramedic looked up at his partner and shook his head. "Time of death, 4:47 p.m., he said quietly. "Mother and fetus." Sana's mother's legs gave out. Layla's scream could be heard 3 villas away. The police arrived 3 minutes later, Dubai police, 4 officers who'd been patrolling nearby when the call came in. They found 60 traumatized witnesses, a dead pregnant woman, and a killer who offered no resistance. Khalid released Faris when the officers approached. They cuffed him, read him his rights in Arabic. Faris stood without protest, his kandura stained, His hands, those hands that had promised to honor and protect his wife, now instruments of her death. As they led him toward the police car, Faris spoke his first and only words since the murder. "She lied to me. She lied about my son. Not remorse, not horror at what he'd done, just cold justification." Outside, the afternoon sun beat down on a scene of devastation. Pink and blue balloons still swayed in the breeze. The destroyed cake lay smeared across the patio. Gifts wrapped in blue paper sat unopened. Guests stood in small clusters, some crying, some in shock, some on phones explaining to loved ones what they'd just witnessed. Sana's pink dress, the one she'd chosen so carefully that morning, was now evidence. Tagged, photographed, blood-stained proof of a father who valued gender over life. How does a celebration of life transform into a scene of death so quickly? What breaks inside a person? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching. The answer isn't simple. It's years of pressure, toxic expectations, and a culture that tells men their worth depends on producing male heirs. It's a family legacy that values bloodlines over humanity. It's the moment when obsession crosses into madness and no one stops it until it's too late. And if you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. Because Sana's story didn't end with her death. It was only beginning. Within hours of Sana's murder, Dubai police launched a full investigation. What they uncovered painted a devastating picture of a tragedy that had been building for months, one that everyone had seen pieces of, but no one had fully understood until it was too late. The forensic report, released 3 days after the murder, revealed the brutality of Faris's attack. Sana had sustained multiple injuries, severe blunt force trauma to the back of her head, consistent with being slammed into the coffee table, bruising on her arms, indicating defensive wounds where she'd tried to protect herself, and ligature marks around her neck from manual strangulation. The medical examiner determined she'd been conscious for most of the attack, aware of what was happening, fighting for her life and her daughter's until the very end. The baby, a girl, as the ultrasound had confirmed, died from oxygen deprivation as her mother was strangled. She would have been viable at 7 months. She could have survived if delivered immediately. Instead, she died still inside Sana, never taking a single breath. Dubai police interviewed all 60 witnesses. Their statements created a timeline that was consistent, damning, and heartbreaking. Multiple guests reported seeing Faris's face change the moment the pink cake was revealed. Several heard his whispered threats to Sana. At least 15 people witnessed him grab her wrist hard enough to leave marks. Everyone saw him overturn the table and drag her inside. Yet only 5 people had tried to intervene before it was too late. The investigation expanded to the couple's apartment in Dubai Marina. There, detectives found evidence that changed the entire narrative. In Sana's bedside drawer, hidden beneath magazines and old receipts, they discovered the ultrasound report from April 2023, 4 months before the baby shower. The report clearly stated, fetal gender, female. She'd known. She'd known for 4 months and hidden the truth because she was terrified. Detectives also recovered Sana's phone. The text message thread with her sister Layla was thousands of messages long, a digital diary of mounting fear. Messages from May. "I don't know how to tell him. He's so convinced it's a boy." June. "He bought another Kandura today, size 2 tons, for a son who doesn't exist." July. "Layla, I'm scared. The way he talks about daughters at family dinners, like they're disappointments." The final message, sent the morning of the baby shower. "Today I tell him, pray for me." Layla would carry that message for the rest of her life. Faris's phone revealed something equally chilling. His search history from the past 4 months showed obsession, turning to desperation. Can ultrasounds be wrong about gender? How to ensure male baby? Gender disappointment, is it normal? What if wife has girl instead of boy? And then, just 2 days before the baby shower, can you divorce pregnant wife in UAE? He'd been planning an exit if the baby wasn't male. Investigators theorized that the public humiliation of the gender reveal being proven wrong in front of his entire family had triggered something worse than divorce. It had triggered rage. Friends and colleagues came forward with stories that painted a disturbing pattern. A former co-worker remembered Faris making comments about needing sons to prove himself to his father. A neighbor recalled hearing raised voices from the couple's apartment several times over the past year. Another friend admitted that Sana had seemed withdrawn in recent months, making excuses to avoid social gatherings. Most damning, Dubai police discovered a domestic dispute report from February 2023, just 1 month after Sana got pregnant. A neighbor had called police after hearing shouting and objects being thrown. Officers had responded, interviewed both Faris and Sana separately. Sana claimed it was just an argument, nothing physical. Faris was calm, apologetic, charming. The officers noted marital dispute, no intervention required, and left. That report sat in a file somewhere, forgotten, while Sana's danger mounted. Faris's family initially tried to defend him. His father released a statement calling it a tragic accident born from emotional distress. His mother claimed Sana had provoked him, but as forensic evidence emerged showing premeditation, showing the violence of the attack, the Al-Hamdan family went silent. Ahmed Al-Hamdan, the man who'd spent years pressuring his son to produce male heirs, made no further public statements. The media explosion was immediate and global. Dubai baby shower murder became international news. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, everyone covered it. Newspapers ran photos of Sana smiling in her pink dress hours before her death. The image became iconic, haunting, a symbol of how quickly celebration could turn to tragedy. Social media erupted with debates. Hashtags trended, number justice for Sana, number gender discrimination kills, number domestic violence awareness. Some blamed toxic masculinity and patriarchal cultures that valued sons over daughters. Others pointed to family pressure and the dangerous expectations placed on couples. Arguments raged about whether this was cultural or universal, about where tradition ended and abuse began. The villa where Sana died was closed for 2 weeks out of respect. When it reopened, the owners removed all event hosting services. They couldn't erase what had happened there, couldn't wash away the memory of pink cake and blood-stained marble. Looking back at the warning signs, could this tragedy have been prevented? Who bears responsibility beyond Faris? The answer implicates more than one man's violence. It implicates a family that measured worth by gender, a culture that dismissed women's fears as overreaction, a police system that responded to a domestic dispute call and saw nothing worth pursuing, friends who noticed Sana's withdrawal but didn't push harder, guests at the baby shower who watched Faris drag his pregnant wife away and hesitated those crucial seconds before intervening. Everyone saw pieces. No one saw the full picture until Sana and her daughter were already dead. And that's the most terrifying part. How many people touched this story and didn't recognize they were watching a murder in slow motion? The trial of Faris Al-Hamdan began on October 15, 2023, 2 months after he murdered his wife and unborn daughter. The Dubai criminal court was packed. Media, victims' rights advocates, and members of both families filled every seat. Sana's family sat on one side of the courtroom, dressed in black. The Al-Hamdan family sat on the other, noticeably smaller in number, as relatives distanced themselves from the accused. Faris was charged with premeditated murder under UAE federal law. The prosecution argued that his internet searches, his reaction to the gender reveal, and the sustained violence of the attack all indicated intent to kill. This wasn't a momentary loss of control, it was rage acted upon with full consciousness. His defense team, 3 expensive lawyers hired by the Al-Hamdan family fortune, mounted a different argument. They claimed temporary insanity brought on by extreme emotional distress. They presented expert witnesses who testified about the cultural pressure Faris faced to produce male heirs, the expectations from his family, the humiliation of public disappointment. They painted Faris as a victim himself, a man crushed by tradition who snapped under unbearable stress. "My client was not in control of his faculties," his lead attorney argued. The combination of cultural pressure, family expectations, and the shock of public humiliation created a perfect storm of psychological breakdown. The prosecution dismantled this defense methodically. They presented Faris's phone records showing searches about divorce 2 days before the murder evidence he was planning, thinking ahead, not acting impulsively. They showed the text messages where Sana expressed fear, proving Faris had been controlling and aggressive for months. They presented the February domestic dispute report that officers had dismissed, showing a pattern of violence. The witness testimonies were devastating. Layla took the stand, barely able to speak through tears. She read aloud Sana's text messages, each one a knife to the heart. "My sister was terrified," she said, her voice breaking. "She told me she was scared of how he'd react. She knew something was wrong, and I told her it would be okay. I told her the baby shower was a good idea." The guilt in her voice silenced the entire courtroom. Khalid, Faris's own brother, testified next. He described the door they couldn't break down, the sounds from inside, finding Sana's body. "I didn't recognize him," Khalid said, looking at Faris. "The man standing over her wasn't my brother. I don't know what he became." Multiple guests testified about Faris's behavior, his obsession with having a son, his comments about daughters being disappointments, the way his face transformed when the pink cake was revealed. One cousin testified that Faris had once said, "A man without sons might as well be dead." The medical examiner's testimony was clinical, but brutal. She explained each injury in detail, the force required to cause skull fractures, the time it takes to strangle someone to death, 2 to 4 minutes of sustained pressure, the fact that Sana would have been conscious and aware for most of it. She confirmed the baby was viable and would have survived if delivered immediately. Then Faris took the stand. His lawyers had advised against it, but he insisted. He wanted to explain himself. What he said instead destroyed any remaining sympathy. "I loved my wife," he began, his voice flat, "but she lied to me for 4 months. She let me believe I was having a son. She let me tell my father, my family, everyone. She knew what it meant to me and she hid it." "So you killed her?" the prosecutor asked. "I was humiliated in front of everyone," Faris said, as if this explained everything. "My whole family was there, my father's business associates. Everyone saw me made a fool. You felt humiliated, so you murdered your pregnant wife? She took away my son." The courtroom erupted. Sana's mother screamed. The judge called for order, threatened to clear the room. When silence returned, the prosecutor asked one final question. "Do you feel remorse for what you did?" Faris paused. For a moment, something flickered across his face, maybe realization, maybe fear. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said quietly. "But she shouldn't have lied." Even in admitting he'd gone too far, he was blaming her. The verdict came on December 8, 2023. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury found Faris al-Hamdan guilty of premeditated murder. Under UAE law, murder carries severe penalties including life imprisonment or, in extreme cases, capital punishment. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. In his statement, Judge Hassan al-Mazrouei didn't hold back. This court recognizes the cultural pressures that exist in our society regarding male heirs. However, no cultural tradition, no family expectation, no personal disappointment justifies the taking of innocent life. The defendant murdered his wife and unborn child because they did not meet his expectations of gender. This represents not only a crime against 2 individuals, but against the dignity and value of all women. This sentence reflects the severity of that crime. The al-Hamdan family left the courtroom without comment. Sana's family wept with relief that justice had been served, though it couldn't bring her back. Is any sentence enough for a crime like this? What does justice even look like when a mother and unborn child are gone? Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments below. If you made it to this point, drop a comment with, "I'm still here." Let's see who is still watching, because the trial answered legal questions, but it couldn't answer the deeper ones. How do we prevent the next Sana? How do we recognize danger before it's too late? And if you're enjoying this content, like, subscribe, and share it with your loved ones to protect them from the same tragedy happening to them in the future. Those questions would haunt everyone who touched this case for years to come. Sana's murder wasn't an isolated incident. It was the extreme end of a problem that exists in every corner of the world, hidden behind closed doors, normalized by tradition, and enabled by silence. Let's be clear. Faris al-Hamdan chose to kill his wife. He bears full responsibility for that choice. But to prevent the next tragedy, we need to understand the system that created a man who could make that choice and believe it was justified. Gender preference isn't unique to the UAE or the Middle East. It exists across continents, cultures, and religions. In parts of India and China, sex-selective abortions have created massive gender imbalances, millions of missing girls who were never born because families wanted sons. In South Korea, despite economic advancement, traditional preference for male heirs persists. Even in Western countries, studies show parents express disappointment when ultrasounds reveal daughters instead of sons. The reasons vary, but the core remains the same. Sons are seen as legacy carriers, family name preservers, economic assets. Daughters are viewed as temporary family members who will marry out, taking their value with them. In patriarchal societies, and most societies are still patriarchal, to varying degrees, a man's worth is often measured by his ability to produce male heirs. It's not just about wanting sons, it's about what sons represent: power, continuity, proof of masculinity. In Faris's world, having a daughter meant failing at the most fundamental measure of manhood. The Gulf region has specific cultural dynamics that intensified this pressure. Tribal lineage matters. Family business empires are built to pass from father to son. Male heirs inherit differently than daughters under traditional interpretations of Islamic law. These aren't excuses. Plenty of Emirati families celebrate daughters and reject gender discrimination, but they're contextual factors that shaped Faris's obsession. What made it deadly was the concept of honor and shame. In cultures where honor is paramount, public humiliation can feel like a fate worse than death. Faris wasn't just disappointed his baby was a girl, he was humiliated that everyone knew he'd been wrong, that his wife had deceived him, that his father watched him fail again. That shame, in his warped thinking, demanded a violent response to restore his honor. This is how honor culture enables violence. It teaches that loss of face justifies extreme action. It tells men that being disrespected is intolerable. It creates conditions where murder becomes, in the perpetrator's mind, a rational response to shame. But here's what Faris and men like him don't understand. There is no honor in murder. There is no shame in having daughters. The real shame belonged to his father, who raised a son to believe otherwise. Sana's silence, her 4 months of hiding the truth, reveals another crucial aspect of gender-based violence. Victims often know they're in danger, but feel trapped with no good options. Tell the truth and risk violence. Stay silent and delay the violence. Either way, they're not safe. Why didn't Sana just leave? It's the question everyone asks, and it reveals how little we understand about abuse. Leaving is the most dangerous time. Statistically, women are most likely to be killed when they're trying to leave their abuser. Sana was 7 months pregnant, financially dependent, living in a culture where divorce carries stigma, dealing with a man whose family had power and connections. Where would she have gone? Who would have protected her? She did what many victims do. She tried to manage the situation, to control when and how the truth came out, to surround herself with witnesses for safety. It was a logical plan. It just didn't account for how far rage can override reason. The bystanders bear examination too. 60 people saw Faris's face change. 15 heard him threaten Sana. 5 tried to intervene. The other 55 stood frozen, assuming someone else would act, hoping it wasn't as bad as it seemed, not wanting to interfere in a family matter. This is how communities enable violence, by not recognizing it until it's too late, by dismissing warning signs, by respecting privacy over safety, by believing that what happens between husband and wife is no one else's business, even when a pregnant woman is being dragged away screaming. Red flags don't always look like violence. Sometimes they look like excessive control, isolating behavior, comments that diminish your worth, conditional love based on meeting expectations, explosive reactions to minor disappointments. These are the patterns that precede physical violence, the warnings that scream danger if we're willing to listen. Sana's story is part of a global crisis. The World Health Organization estimates that 1 in 3 women worldwide experiences physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Femicide, the killing of women because they're women, claims tens of thousands of lives annually. Sometimes it's honor killings. Sometimes it's domestic violence that escalates. Sometimes, like with Sana, it's both. The intersection of domestic abuse and femicide is clear. When violence is normalized in relationships, when women's lives are valued less than men's honor, when gender determines worth, death becomes an inevitable outcome for some. Have you witnessed family pressure lead to toxic situations in your community? What conversations should we be having in our families about gender equality? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're urgent ones. Because somewhere right now, another woman is hiding an ultrasound report, Another man is measuring his worth by his ability to produce sons. Another family is applying pressure that will push someone toward violence. Sana's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths, that our traditions can be toxic, that our families can enable abuse, that our silence can be deadly. The question isn't whether this could happen in your community. The question is whether you'll recognize it when it does, and whether you'll have the courage to intervene before celebration turns to tragedy. Sana al-Rashan didn't get to change the world while she was alive, but her death started a conversation that might save others. 3 months after the trial, Sana's mother and sister Layla established the Sana al-Rashan Foundation for Women's Safety. Their mission is straightforward: prevent gender-based violence through education, provide resources for women in danger, and challenge cultural norms that value sons over daughters. The foundation runs workshops in schools across the UAE, teaching young people about healthy relationships and gender equality. They've created a confidential hotline for women experiencing domestic abuse, staffed by counselors who speak Arabic, English, Urdu, and Tagalog, recognizing that domestic violence crosses all cultural boundaries in Dubai's diverse population. They've funded safe houses and legal assistance for women trying to leave dangerous marriages. Layla became the foundation's spokesperson, channeling her grief into action. Sana was terrified to speak up. She said in an interview 6 months after her sister's death, "Our foundation exists so other women don't have to die silent." The UAE government responded too. In early 2024, they strengthened domestic violence laws, making it mandatory for police to file formal reports even when victims don't press charges. They increased funding for domestic violence awareness campaigns. Dubai police launched specialized training for officers responding to domestic disputes, teaching them to recognize escalation patterns that Sana's case revealed so clearly. It's not enough. Systemic change takes generations, but it's a start. Sana's story went viral globally, sparking conversations in communities that had long avoided them. On social media, thousands shared their own experiences with gender preference pressure. Daughters wrote about feeling like disappointments to fathers who wanted sons. Women revealed hiding pregnancy genders out of fear. Men admitted the pressure they'd felt to produce male heirs and how it had damaged their relationships. The conversation was painful but necessary. Traditions that had been unquestioned for generations were suddenly being examined, challenged, reimagined. What does Sana's legacy teach us? That courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Sana was terrified, but she still tried to tell the truth in the way she thought safest. That it didn't save her doesn't make her choice less brave. It makes our responsibility to protect others more urgent. Her daughter, the baby girl who never took a breath, is remembered too. Layla named the foundation's scholarship program after her, the Unnamed Daughter Scholarship, supporting young women pursuing education in fields traditionally dominated by men. Because that baby girl deserved the chance to become whoever she wanted to be, just like every daughter does. How can communities protect potential victims? By recognizing the warning signs before violence becomes lethal. Watch for these red flags. A partner who controls finances, isolates you from family and friends, monitors your phone or movements, makes you feel worthless, explodes over small issues, blames you for their anger, threatens harm if you leave, or shows obsessive jealousy. If you're experiencing any of these, understand, you're not overreacting. Your fear is valid. Abuse escalates. What starts as control often ends in violence. Make a safety plan. Tell someone you trust, a friend, family member, co-worker. Document the abuse with photos, texts, recordings, if safe to do so. Research local resources before you need them. Pack emergency bags with copies of important documents. When you're ready to leave, do it when the abuser isn't home, and don't tell them where you're going. For those witnessing potential abuse, don't wait for absolute certainty before acting. Check in privately. Offer specific help, not just, "Let me know if you need anything." Keep checking in, even if they push you away. It took Sana years to confide in anyone. Don't judge their choices, just stay present. The cost of silence is too high. Sana's silence cost her life. Our collective silence about gender-based violence costs thousands of lives annually. But here's what we can control: our own voices, our willingness to challenge toxic traditions, our courage to intervene when we see danger, our commitment to teaching the next generation that every life has equal value regardless of gender. Traditions must evolve, or they become chains. The tradition that tells men their worth depends on producing sons. It needs to die, so women like Sana can live. The tradition of family privacy that prevents intervention in domestic disputes, it needs to be replaced with a culture of accountability and protection. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. In the UAE, call the Dubai Foundation for Women and Children at 800 to 111. Internationally, search Domestic Violence Hotline plus your country name for local resources. These services are confidential, often available 24/7, and can provide safety planning, legal guidance, and shelter information. What will you do differently after hearing Sana's story? Will you speak up when you hear jokes about gender disappointment? Will you intervene when a friend shows controlling behavior? Will you teach your children that daughters and sons hold equal value? Will you recognize warning signs in your own relationships or those of people you love? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This conversation doesn't end here, it continues with every person who refuses to stay silent. And subscribe to True Crime Journal HQ for more stories that matter, stories that challenge us to build safer communities for everyone. Sana Al-Rashan was 26 years old. She loved fashion design, dreamed of launching her own business, and died protecting the daughter she already loved before birth. She wasn't a statistic or a headline. She was a woman with hopes and plans and a future that was stolen by a man who couldn't see past his own ego. Remember her not just as a victim, but as a human being who deserved better, who deserved to watch her daughter grow, who deserved to live. And let her memory be the reason you speak up next time, because the next Sana might still be saved.